I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania some time of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight. And there the snake throws her enamel skin, weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in. And with the juice of this I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasy.
Has anyone seen that before? It's a very rare clip of Peter Brook's very famous now 1970 version of Midsummer Night's Dream. Incredibly famous. There is not a complete video of it, unless anyone else has found it. You can't buy it. There are a few rare clips on the internet. It became extremely famous, not just for the people that it had in it, such as Ian McKellen, but because of the way that it was done. And you'll see there with a little bit of plate spinning that was happening, largely in a white box with acrobatics and circus tricks, trapeze acts, plate spinning, not your everyday Shakespeare performance. It became very, very famous. If anyone says Peter Brook, this is what they will know. This is the thing. The practitioners and groups that we have picked as a key focus this year, and as I said, it might not be that when you're in your seminar groups, it is entirely obvious that you are studying the methodologies of those people. Yeah, you are, because you're looking at kind of exercises and influences. However, the key practitioners are there for a reason this year. And that's the 3 directors this term and the companies, the 3 companies next term. There's one thing that binds them all together. And that is, and I said to my seminar group today, they're all just looking for truth. Plain and simple. They're all just looking to interpret text truthfully. And they go about it in different ways. And just because they're trying to find the truth does not mean it might not to you appear sometimes absurd, sometimes surreal. It will, because it's experimental. Yeah? That's the first thing that connects them. The second thing that connects them, and I would argue that connects all directors, is that all they're doing is telling stories. They are essential storytellers. And again, they go about it in different ways. They all connect. We will see this as we move through the year. They all connect, but they might go about it in different ways. The other thing that these directors and companies have in common, the third final thing, is that they're into reinvention. They're looking to reinvent text, and they're looking to reinvent storytelling in some way. The reason we start with Peter Brook is simple, because Peter Brook picks up really nicely where we left off in the spring last year when David spoke to us about our tone. Peter Brook is one of the most famous British experimental theatre directors we've probably seen. And he becomes particularly famous and interesting to us for his understanding and appreciation and work with classic text. Peter Brook liked to work with Shakespeare. Have people in here started to read The Empty Space? What does The Empty Space tell us? What is The Empty Space? That's a question.
It's a general critique on theatre as Peter Brook saw it, and he establishes 4 what he believes or perceives theatre to be: deadly theatre,
Yeah.
holy theatre,
Yeah.
rough theatre,
Yeah.
immediate theatre.
Yeah. And what's the purpose of this exploration? You're right, the book is essentially a collection of lectures, or lecture discussions, isn't it? About how Peter Brook perceives the theatre at the time of its writing. This is the 1960s. So if we remember, we've gone through the British social realism, the 1940s, with people like Osborne, who are also making a change, and we've got to this point, and anyone with any kind of iota of common sense or general history will know there was a lot of stuff happening in the 60s and 70s. A lot of quite radical change, politically and culturally. And it's a book of lectures, as George put, which contains various chapters about different forms of theatre as he sees it. And what's the purpose of it? Why is he discussing this stuff?
I suppose to deconstruct theatre to progress. With it,
Yeah,
to make
he's
it-
deconstructing. The deconstruction is a perfect word for us to use this year. Deconstruction. When we talk about experimental theatre, experimental literature, deconstruction is a great word. Yeah? He is breaking something down. And what he puts to us in the beginning of this book is firstly his idea of space. Yeah? And he talks about how any space can become a theatre. We don't just have to be in a traditional theatre in the West End for it to be theatre. And he gives you examples of when he ends up in someone's living room, watching them do a show. Or in a kind of burnt-out church somewhere in Germany, watches them doing a show. That any space becomes a theatre as soon as that man walks across that space, that beautiful quote at the beginning, and there's a happening, theatre happens. And then he goes on to explain what the purpose of him writing is. Which is, yes, we have a problem. At this point in time, back in the 60s, to Peter Brook, we have a problem. And the problem that we find ourselves with is that sometimes we have such a traditional approach to theatre that it kills it, essentially. Bashes it over the head to death with a mackerel or a haddock, and it kills it. Yeah? And Peter Brook's not very happy with this. It's exactly the same thing that Terry was talking about. And of course, and what does he say that theatre then should do? What does he think theatre is? Anyone? No right or wrong answer?
Doesn't he say, like, you have to take each audience and think about what they want?
Yes, largely it's a perception kind of theory there in terms of what your audience are responding to. But also, about your audience, is that it's about the human condition. Theatre is about, something that we've always said to you, your job is the world. Theatre is about the essential, the fundamental human condition. And you have to try to appeal to everything, yeah? But it's about the human condition. This is why he turns to Shakespeare. Because for Peter Brook, Shakespeare is perfect in terms of the combination of the language, how it articulates itself, but also how it is representative of our very human condition. And we know this because we studied Hamlet last year. And Hamlet is one of the best examples of that. Yeah, if we look at the breakdown of a man, of this human condition, of the feelings that we all experience, that we all have, that we can all associate with. And he turns his hand then to Shakespeare for that reason, and also because he feels that Shakespeare is one of the things that we do really badly. Really badly in British theatre. And he talks about this idea of performance, of acting Shakespeare too much. So what happens is when you get given Shakespeare in your hand, what runs through your head is the idea of how Shakespeare should be done. And so as soon as we stand up on stage, and this is very crude and base, we become Shakespearean actors. And our hands go up in funny places, and our voice and our brow go to a strange place on our face, and our eyebrows drop down. Yeah? And he talks about this tradition, and it is the tradition of Shakespeare that is killing it. Good. What does he say about these individual chapters, the deadly theatre, the holy theatre, the rough theatre, the immediate theatre? What are they? What's the deadly theatre? I've just kind of said it. Yeah.
Bad theatre.
Bad theatre. Specifically, deadly in Peter, yes.
Sorry, I was going to say when it's lost its liveliness.
Yes, and it lost its light. Yeah? Deadly in his book is a euphemism for dull, meaning that deadly theatre is theatre in which an audience is a spectator, not a participant. Deadly theatre is theatre in which audiences and practitioners alike are essentially unmoved and or unchanged by what's going on, and in which nothing new or insightful is evoked by what's being presented on the stage. What's the holy theatre? Oh, George.
Making the invisible visible, creating happening.
Yeah, largely. And the holy filter talks about what we think is spiritual in theatre, what we think is sacred, and yes, letting go of this kind of idea of something that being sacred and bringing it to the forefront. Shorthand term to describe what is spiritual in theatre, and is applied to the relations of both the work of the theatre practitioner and the theatre audience. The author implies that one of the subconscious longings that bring audiences to the theatre is the desire for the holy. To obtain even a glimpse of, can someone turn that phone off please? To obtain even a glimpse of a spiritual truth that makes everyday life have some meaning. That we go expectant of this, that something is going to be sacred. More often than not, I think we would agree we're disappointed by a lot of theatre. Yeah? The rough theatre, what's the rough theatre?